Hello friends, welcome back. So yes, I'm back. It's been a while, and if you saw the video that I made, like the first update, my great grandmother was actually buried yesterday, and this video is being recorded in October 6th, and I might post this in maybe October 7th. But hey, today is going to be different. Earlier, I watched a video that is actually about a true crime. True crime, for example, murder, let's say drugs, those type of stuff. And this is actually a wrestling true story. True crime documentary, and it's called RABID, the Chris Benoit story. So if you don't know who Chris Benoit is, he's a WWE wrestler back in maybe around like 90s or 80s. I forgot because I watched the WWE too, but I'm not like a huge fan, like maybe a fan that's been watching WWE since like maybe 2010, maybe around the year 2000 or in the 90s. I started watching WWE around maybe 2020. I'm pretty new in the community, so yes. And I heard about this Chris Benoit, and this is actually a pretty sensitive topic to talk about because he did a crime where people will remember of him than his wrestling career, because it is a pretty gruesome crime. And I'm gonna start the recording because I've started the video kind of late, 2 minutes. I clicked, okay, there we go, and there we go. This is actually the viewer discretion is advised. Warning, the following video deals with true crime incidents and addresses difficult subject matter throughout. Viewer discretion is advised. And I'm going to like this because it's a true crime documentary, and it's actually made by Cultaholic Wrestling, and I'm already subscribed to his channel, and I've seen some of their videos. It's fantastic, and yes, let's get started. Okay. Oh.
And now to the murder-suicide involving pro wrestler Chris Benoit.
Chris Benoit murdered his wife, 7-year-old son earlier this week in suburban Atlanta. Benoit then hanged himself.
Police now treating the discovery as a double murder-suicide.
Georgia authorities say they found a lot of prescription medication in the Benoit home.
Speculation is running wild. Did steroids play a role, or is there another explanation?
World Wrestling Entertainment, Benoit's employer, says it's wrong to speculate that steroid use was responsible for this tragedy.
And obviously this is not an act of rage, it's an act of deliberation when you do something.
Okay, that's Vince McMahon. This is actually a pretty controversial subject, and I'm reacting to this video made by Cultaholic Wrestling. Guys, I'm just here to just watch this and try to learn more about this, because this is a scary thing to happen to anyone, because it's pretty scary. And I'm pretty rusty. It's been a while since I recorded video, so yeah.
I guess over 3 days. It's not an act of rage, be it steroid rage or roid rage, whatever it's called.
Now, police must wait weeks for toxicology reports to determine if steroids were in the blood of the man known as the Canadian Crippler.
Canadian Crippler.
On June 25th, 2007, the professional wrestling business changed forever when news broke that the bodies of Chris Benoit
2007? Is it in March? June? Oh my god. That's actually January, February, March, April, June. That's actually 1 month or 1.5 months after I was born. Because I was...
His wife Nancy and their son Daniel had all been found in the family home.
Okay, so it's like 1.5 months after I was born. I was born on March 31st, 2007.
Wrestling had seen its share of tragedy and premature death, but this was different. Active major WWE stars had been found dead before their time in the past, such as Chris Benoit's best friend Eddie Guerrero, but never alongside their loved ones. The news led to widespread disbelief, confusion, and grief before those feelings turned to horror. Chris Benoit was respected by all and widely considered one of the greatest.
I'm sorry for pausing that much because this is just like I'm trying to talk much in the video just to try to get back to the YouTube thing, and yeah, Chris Benoit was actually respected in the WWE locker room. Yeah, is that kind of looks like it's Chris Jericho, and obviously this is Eddie Guerrero. Yeah, they made like a tribute to him because he passed away, and this is before they learned about the horrible crime that he did. They did like what's it called that? They did this tribute where they show other wrestlers' thoughts about or their tribute to Chris Benoit, and it is just. And after learning about the crime that he did, they just erased them. They just removed them because the crime was pretty brutal.
Wrestlers of all time. He was thought to be a humble and hard-working man who, to the public's knowledge, had never put a foot wrong in either his professional or personal life. This was the person responsible for all 3 of their deaths. It was a revelation that shook the industry to its core. How did this happen? How could this happen? The investigation into the deaths revealed the grisly facts about the double murder-suicide and the tempestuous life that Chris and Nancy led. Each revelation brought with it a heightened sense of shock, as well as scrutiny from the public, fans, and even government agencies. As well as shattering the lives of those affected, the Benoit family tragedy almost destroyed the wrestling business. Even now, some 15 years after the fact, questions remain. Christopher Michael Benoit was born on May 21st, 1967 in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Growing up in Edmonton, Alberta, the young Benoit was described as quiet, soft-spoken, and easygoing by those who knew him best. Something of a loner who enjoyed spending time by himself, his first love was professional wrestling, specifically the Calgary-based Stampede Pro Wrestling territory.
Yeah, 1967, yeah, Stampede Wrestling. This is actually an old wrestling what you call it, a promotion. There's different wrestling promotions, and And before like the WWE, they have this territories thing where, like, for example, Stampede Wrestling territory is maybe, for example, Quebec or Quebec, Canada, yeah. Or for example, this is just an example, and I'm just trying to make something. For example, maybe let's go for maybe WWE. Imagine WWE is their territory is for example Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland City, or you know what? I have to learn more about the United States. Yeah, Ohio, yeah, and other promotions have their own territories. It's pretty different. Okay, it's not history. It's actually a true crime documentary, and we reacted to like a true crime documentary, and it's like about like Jack the Ripper, and that's why I'm reacting to this, just to, I don't know, just to see what it is, because after I watched like some WWE shows and like Raw, SmackDown, I heard about Chris Benoit, and then I had this question, why, where is he in like in everything, like where is him in like the WWE official channel, because they have an official YouTube channel, and I couldn't see any Chris Benoit in it. I hope not. I don't know much. So, and then I searched about it and saw like a lot of things in Google. I read some, but stopped because I'm not really interested. But now, I'm a little bit interested in this topic because it's just weird.
After attending one of the promotion shows at the Victoria Pavilion in his early teens, Benoit was hooked. He knew what he wanted to do with his life, and he knew exactly who he wanted to be: the Dynamite Kid. Tom Billington was a compact, explosive performer who was light years ahead of the vast majority of his peers when it came to his style in the ring. He was also a troubled and cruel man who was prone to playing sadistic practical jokes and intimidating people through threats of violence. Benoit was drawn to Dynamite's in-ring intensity and believability, and soon began to idolize him. Part of this involved emulating Dynamite's physical appearance, and before too long, Benoit was pumping iron in order to achieve the chiseled physique required for a career in the business. Though he was still in high school, Benoit was dedicated to his vision and prioritized his training ahead of a social life. After being a regular at shows and then helping out as a member of the ring crew, Benoit began his training in earnest, first in the ring before Stampede events, and then eventually at the legendary Hart family mansion. He would take a Greyhound bus from Edmonton to Calgary every Friday after school and stay for the weekend, learning the tricks of the trade from one of wrestling's most famous families. Benoit would later say that he owed everything he accomplished in his career to Stu Hart, who gave him his first opportunities and helped train him in the infamous Dungeon Basement Gym. Though this line about Stu Hart and dungeon training made for a great soundbite on television and gave Benoit credibility, it's likely not grounded in reality. According to Benoit's father Michael, Chris was predominantly trained by Mike Hammer while in Edmonton, as well as one of Stampede's referees. In Calgary, the two people most responsible for his training were Jerry Morrow and Angel Acevedo, aka the Cuban Assassin, who both worked for Stu at the time. Over time, Benoit became something of an adopted member of the Hart family. Once his training had been deemed sufficient, Chris Benoit made his professional wrestling debut on November 22, 1985, on a Stampede wrestling show in Calgary. He teamed with Rick Patterson to defeat Carl Butch Moffat and Mike Hammer in the second match on the card. It was an inauspicious debut for a performer who would rather quickly establish himself as one of the top in-ring talents in the entire industry. The 18-year-old, who very much resembled a young Dynamite Kid, would continue wrestling for Stampede, gaining a cult following until the promotion closed its doors in 1989. One of the highlights of his time in Stu Hart's company was undoubtedly getting the opportunity to face his idol. Prior to retiring and going back home to England, Billington gifted Benoit a pair of his wrestling boots. The torch had been passed. By the time the Stampede promotion shut up shop, however, it was no longer Benoit's main priority. On the recommendation of Stampede regular Bad News Brown, Benoit had begun working for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He first spent a year refining his skills and paying his dues in the company's notoriously tough dojo, where he was expected to not only push himself physically during the brutal conditioning drills, but also act as a young boy. This involved running errands for the roster's
rookie hazing. You know, if you're new, you need to do this because they're not going to let you just come on here and like, I don't know, be nice. There's what we call like that's what they call rookie hazing, where the rookie should gain the trust of the veterans and has to do this stuff, for example, like cleaning, maybe in basketball, bringing the veteran players their towels, you know, rookie hazing.
Veterans, as well as doing menial tasks like sweeping the gym floor and cleaning the toilets. It was an eye-opening, formative experience for him. In these early years, stationed overseas, Benoit began to solidify his reputation as one of the top prospects in the business, refining and perfecting his Dynamite Kid-esque moves and mannerisms. Put under a mask as the Pegasus Kid, he routinely had the best match on the show alongside similarly hungry and revolutionary peers like Jushin Liger. It was while working for New Japan in the early 90s that Benoit met and formed a strong bond with two fellow Gaijin workers, Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero. The trio, dubbed the Three Amigos, would go on to follow each other professionally from Japan to ECW to WCW and eventually to WWE. During these early globe-trotting days, Chris Benoit was married to a Canadian woman named Martina, with whom he would have 2 children, a daughter named Megan and a son called David. That marriage would eventually deteriorate and end in divorce after Benoit fell in love with Nancy Sullivan.
Okay, so it is just weird. This man being friends with like the most respected wrestler in like WWE.
Nancy Elizabeth Toffaloni was born in Boston.
It's just weird. It's just weird, you know? Like knowing that this guy committed this crime and he has like friendship with someone that is pretty respected, like Eddie Guerrero. I'm sorry, just look at the ad. It's just weird for me. There's like, I don't know, I'm not a expert of this, but maybe I don't know, like maybe he did this crime because of something, maybe mental health. I don't know. I'm not an expert of this.
May 17, 1964. Her family settled in Florida, where Nancy got work as a model as well as selling event programs at local wrestling shows. A fan of wrestling from an early age, she came to the attention of wrestler Kevin Sullivan after he spotted her during an apartment wrestling photo shoot where Nancy performed under the name Para. It took several months for Sullivan to convince Nancy to join his act, but she eventually agreed to join his oddball crew alongside the likes of Luna Vachon. She did so under the guise of Fallen Angel. While on the road as one of his kayfabe Satanists, Nancy fell in love with Sullivan and ended up divorcing her first husband, a man named Jim Dowse who had been her high school sweetheart. After being together for 7 or 8 years, Nancy married Kevin in 1992, taking his surname. A tremendous valet who was always utterly convincing in her psycho shtick, Nancy accompanied her husband from territory to territory, which included a stint in WCW between 1989 and 1990. Rechristened Woman, Nancy first managed Sullivan and then the tag team Doom. Before long, the couple left WCW and continued to journey around the independent scene for outfits like Smoky Mountain Wrestling and ECW, where Nancy lent her managerial expertise to the Sandman and Chris Benoit's good friend from New Japan, 2 Cold Scorpio. It was in ECW where the pair would likely have first met. Before long, Benoit would make his way to WCW. Not far behind him was Nancy, following her husband back south, as he was now both a wrestler and a member of the WCW.
Ah, yes. Nancy. I remember him when she escorted Ric Flair. Oh my God.
Booking team. Though Kevin would help his wife get a job with Ted Turner's organization, things were not exactly peachy.
Please correct me if you're a wrestling fan. I know that's Ric Flair. That's Ric Flair. The face
between the Sullivans at home. In fact, things hadn't been stable for some time. Their marriage was on the rocks, and working together in the wrestling business would only speed up its disintegration. In later years, Nancy's sister Sandra Toffaloni claimed that the relationship between Kevin and Nancy was, at best, volatile. This included accusations of domestic abuse, with Sandra saying the incidents between the pair took place often and that on one occasion in the mid-90s, a fight had left Nancy with a black eye. Kevin Sullivan, for his part, has repeatedly refuted those allegations and counterclaimed that Nancy had in fact stabbed him during one of their arguments. According to him, the incident landed Nancy in a Florida prison for 3 days before Kevin bailed her out and neglected to press charges. However, police investigating the Benoit tragedy found that Nancy had kept records of abuse she had suffered, which, they ascertained, took place during the relationship with Sullivan. By the time Nancy came back to WCW, the couple had noticeably drifted apart. Kevin was 11 years her senior, which he cited as a possible reason they grew more distant as time went on. Come 1996, they weren't spending as much time with one another. He was mainly staying in the Florida Keys, while Nancy opted to spend her time at their house in Daytona. Their problems certainly predated Benoit's arrival in WCW, but the crippler would play an integral part in their union ending for good. Benoit's career trajectory in WCW looked promising, erasing any doubts he may have had following a disappointing spell there a few years earlier. He quickly went from cruiserweight fodder to Four Horsemen member before
Ah, yes, the Four Horsemen. Chris Benoit. The only person that I knew here is Ric Flair, and yeah,
Sullivan booked him in a feud against himself. It started off simply enough, but the waters got murky fast. In his pursuit to blur the lines between fact and fiction, Sullivan added his wife into the mix. Nancy was a valet for the Horsemen at the time, and per Kevin's storyline, Benoit stole Nancy away from him. Benoit and Nancy were shown on television cozying up to one another in intimate scenes, and Chris made several shoot-style comments about Nancy's marriage to Kevin. To convince the fans that this was at least somewhat real, Sullivan instructed Nancy and Benoit to travel together, eat together at restaurants on the road, stay at the same hotels, and even hold hands in public. Chris had expressed reservations about the storyline with Sullivan and Bischoff because his then-wife Martina had just given birth to their daughter and things were already tense between the pair at home. Benoit didn't want his wife becoming paranoid while she was at home looking after their newborn daughter, as well as son David, who was just a few years old at the time. In a perhaps not so shocking twist, fantasy soon became reality as Chris and Nancy developed genuine feelings for each other and began having an affair. Chris divorced his wife and Nancy divorced her husband, making them officially an item. All while this was going on, Benoit and Sullivan still had to work with each other in the ring, their matches taking on an air of heightened realism due to the circumstances. However, although Kevin partly blamed Chris for the breakup of his marriage, Benoit later attested that Sullivan was always professional and never took liberties with him in the ring. At the 1997 Bash at the Beach, after about a year of butting heads on screen, Benoit beat Sullivan in a retirement match. Kevin then quit being an active in-ring performer and began to focus his responsibilities as a backstage creative force. Nancy left WCW after the retirement match, while Chris stayed on and fought an uphill battle. Despite being widely regarded as a phenomenal talent with enormous untapped potential, the undersized Benoit was never hugely in favor with the decision makers and continually hit his head on the glass ceiling. He certainly achieved some success in WCW, but he, along with the likes of Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, knew that success had a cap placed on it, regardless of how many great matches they had or how consistently they performed. When Sullivan...
Okay, so we're gonna end it there. When Sullivan. Okay, so...
Sa mundong puno ng siguro, gamit ko ang sigurado.
Okay, so the reason why we're ending it there, because the video is getting too long. 25 minutes. It's a little long. So guys, thank you for watching. It's been a while since I recorded the video. I know this is a sensitive topic, but hey, I just wanted to know what really happened, because I just searched it up in Google, read some article, and that's it. And I don't know the whole story of it. So thank you for watching. If you're a big fan of wrestling, you probably know who Chris Benoit is. And yes, and I know this is sensitive. I'm very sorry if you're offended, if you don't like this stuff. Just comment it down below, and I'll just try to, I don't know, I want to finish this because it interests me. And yeah, thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.